I just asked you how you distinguish between the people who you think you're being honest and have access to the facts for the religion that you accept, how you distinguish between those and the people who are making claims for other religions that you don't accept. And instead of giving me anything close to how you would tell the difference, which is what epistemology is about, you're basically saying these religious accounts are true and these religious accounts over here are not true. And you have no better evidence for your truth than they have for theirs. What you have is a claim from someone who you find truthful. Now, are you just going to say that for all those other religions or for those other supernatural accounts, you just don't find those people truthful?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then I don't find yours truthful. And there's no point in having a debate because we no longer give a damn about epistemology. We're just going to go with how our gut feels, right?
Well, we're going to look at the evidence.
There are lots of wonderful evidences for God's existence.
And when
I've been asking for evidence. Do you have any evidence that doesn't come from the Bible?
No.
Okay. So you have nothing but a hearsay account from an unidentifiable source.
We have evidence from the New Testament, including Paul and the Gospels and so forth.
Yeah.
So why don't you start responding to the evidence rather than just dismissing it?
It's not evidence. It's claims, not evidence. There is no evidence. There is no physical evidence. What you can do is you can say that there are people who wrote stories and you find them compelling, and I don't.
If you're just going to keep dismissing the evidence, then we're done.
Yes, we are. We are. And you know whose fault it is? The God that you believe in, because the God that you believe in is too stupid to understand that when he presents something in a way where it's indistinguishable from other things that are false, that's the end of the conversation. Yeah. I didn't make up the rules about what counts as evidence. Oh, did he just leave?
Yes, he did. And I'd be moving around if I was you, Matt, while you're talking about God in that tone of voice. You might get struck by a bolt of lightning. Hey, look, apologies. We are running hideously late tonight. We had a few camera issues. That is an understatement. But look, we are here. I hope that doesn't happen tonight, what just happened on that fiery debate with Matt Dillahunty and Dr. Jonathan McLatchy is his name. A different beginning to our normal podcast. An atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. This is episode 10, featuring Matt Dillahunty there, debating Dr. Jonathan McLatchy about evidence of God's existence. I'm Peter Rowe, your host for this podcast series. Great to have you watching and or listening. We are live on YouTube. I hope you've stuck around with us and been very patient. Thank you. Also on Facebook. On this 21st day of February 2024, broadcasting from Perth, Western Australia, it is 8 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time. You can also check out our little shorts, not the denim ones we're wearing, on TikTok, Spotify, and Instagram. Now, speaking of clothing, Luke and I got the memo about wearing a sleeveless shirt, but Rich, being the conservative Christian man that he is very well dressed. Now, Matt Dillahunty, if you don't know... Sorry?
He thinks it's a sin.
Well, you know what? It just might be. And listen, for those of you who don't know who Matt Dillahunty is, like me, very much a committed Christian some time ago. In fact, he was training to be a Baptist minister, believe it or not. And then also, like me, he decided that in order to be a logical thinker in the pursuit of reason and evidence, one must be honest with the way one sees things. He decided to go it alone and has for many years had his own televised webcast, The Atheist Experience. Now he travels the world debating Christians mainly about the existence of God. You can watch him in full flight on YouTube. Tonight I'm reading from a script, yes, because we had troubles with computer problems. But don't worry about it. We'll sort it all out. Tonight I'd like to get your perspective on this discussion. I see no evidence for the existence of God or anything spiritual at all, for that matter, but I'm open to possibilities. So can you convince me that God exists? We can read your questions during this podcast, which usually lasts around about 45 minutes. We might cut it a little bit short tonight. We'll see how we go. And we would love for you to be involved. I will warn you, though, the Bible, to me, is not evidence. The Bible makes claims of men. That is very different than evidence. If you want to claim you saw a purple unicorn, you better be able to show it to me. Otherwise, you're just a radical nut. To keep me honest, my two co-hosts, Richard Stalls and Luke Feeney, join me. Welcome, gentlemen.
G'day, Peter. It's good to be here again.
Mate.
Yeah,
very good.
Break last week.
Very good.
It is good to be back.
Been a couple of weeks since I've been in the chair, and I've missed it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be back.
Oh, we've missed you too, mate. That's good that you are back. Our other regular guest that you might be familiar with is Suresh Rajan. He's currently in his hometown of Bangalore in India. We hope having a well-earned rest. So hopefully we'll catch up with Suresh next week. So let's look at one particular thing that Matt said, which I find very important. He points out to Jonathan that he simply dismisses other religious claims with no more evidence than they have for their claims. That, to me, is a very good and really indefensible statement. That is what epistemology is. I'll kick off with that shortly. Part 2 of this debate, if we have time tonight, I'm going to be asking, is God all-powerful and all good? Of course, that's a quote from our normal Neil deGrasse Tyson, who opens the show with what he says. If God is all-powerful and all good, part 2 of this debate, I'll be asking, is God all-powerful and all good? Because if he's not, what is God? And if he is all-powerful and good, why the hell doesn't life on earth reflect that? It seems to me there are a litany of excuses made up by Christians to let God off the hook instead of holding him accountable. I charge all Christians of faith to come up with something a bit better than relying on faith alone to defend your case claim, which is that there is a real God who exists and that Jesus is the Son of God who is set to return. So firstly, gentlemen, do you both accept that the Bible is not evidence enough to prove the existence of God?
I'm going to let the Bible guy start.
Yeah.
I don't. You'll be here all night.
I need to wait for my brain to wake up. I've been lopping trees in my backyard all afternoon, so it's been a million miles an hour. It's the first time I've sat down, as you do.
See, you're a lumberjack and you're okay.
I am. That's it. Exactly right. Well, I don't think it's enough evidence to indisputably prove the existence of God, but I wouldn't discount it as evidence in any way, shape, or form. You need to take it for what it is, and what you said in the intro is absolutely correct. They are man's views, based on experiences, based on a whole bunch of stuff. And I think there's a difference between talking about the historicity of Jesus and talking about, is Jesus the Son of God and does God exist? I think they're different.
Sure.
They require different evidence, because the evidence of the historicity of Jesus doesn't go as far as to say that God exists or that he is the Son of God. You can take that evidence, as I do, and choose to believe those claims, but I don't solely use the Bible just for that, and I don't think we can. I think that's fraught with danger, and I think it's probably an irresponsible way to do it, because what do you do when the Bible doesn't behave the way you want it to? Your faith falls apart. So it has to be bigger than that, which I'm sure we'll get into. But for me, the Bible cannot be evidence for the existence of God on its own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, good answer.
No, I agree. The Bible's good when you buy into the package. You know what I mean? Once you go, okay, yeah, there's God. I'm willing to give this Christian thing a go. Then it sort of starts really getting some traction. But for people who are asking the question, is there evidence for God? The writings of people aren't going to get you very far, especially writings that are ancient, speaking in an ancient language, in a different way of even thinking about how the universe hangs together. It's not too helpful for that. But yeah, so when people ask me, is there evidence for God, I don't tend to pull out my Bible as the first thing to start talking about. There's a lot of other stuff, and you've really got to start somewhere else, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
So
if you're
I
a
did.
person searching, that is the
What's
exact
that?
place, isn't it? When you search, that's the exact place
When you're
to
certain.
start.
Oh yeah.
If you're searching, because without that evidence, and let's say, for instance, you've already crossed that path and gone into the deeper issues to be able to, find meaning. But if you're just someone listening tonight wanting to know the answer to the question, we've got two believers here. Well, both of you very familiar with the teachings and the Word of God according to the Bible, and myself, who was naturally, and I think fairly, asking for evidence to prove. Now, if somebody's out there listening and they want to know the evidence, there's no point in them going to the Bible, because the Bible's just, let's face it, it's to a lay person, even to experts, it's a bit of a mess. It's a bit of a contradiction. It's been written over, what is it, nearly almost 1,500 years from beginning to end. I mean, wow, we can't expect accuracy. But so a lay person can't find evidence of God by reading the Bible. So what do? Where do they find it? Where do you look? Can you go and see what God has done? Well, no, you can't see that anywhere. So to me, you end up back at the same starting spot. There is no evidence, and I think that that's a really big ask to people, to expect people to believe in something when you simply cannot prove that that's true, which is what that Dr. Jonathan said, and in the end he got so frustrated he just unplugged, got his ball and went home. Which achieves
probably
nothing.
one of the smarter things he could have done in that sort of if you only you don't bring a Bible to an atheist fight, I guess.
Well, you need.
Well, that's true.
You need to.
And
you need to look at Matt Dillahunty and see how he plays,
Exactly.
and how he works the system. It's very, very hard. I've watched him a million times debate all sorts of people, Islamic fundamentalists, and all sorts of people, and you can't beat him because his argument is flawless. Which is where I got my argument from. I want evidence. If you haven't got evidence, shut up.
Well, I think
present company except.
no, exactly. Well, yeah. If we're going to shut up, the show's done. But better not. His arguments are flawless if they're made against fundamentalist belief systems, fundamentalist Christians, fundamentalist whatever. It's flawless because it can't hold up to the kinds of claims it's making. There is evidence you can hold against it. It doesn't stand up to that. It certainly doesn't stand up to any deep scrutiny of even just, you don't have to be some sort of PhD in philosophy, but just basic philosophy, basic logic, depending on how ugly fundamentalism is, just basic humanity. It doesn't hold up to any of that stuff. So I think what Matt Dillahunty's doing is probably quite necessary for people who are caught in a fundamentalist view of the world, because it's not a very it can't be true. And if it's not true, you don't want to be holding on to it, because it's not going to do what you want it to do. Surely something true or is got to be better. So yeah, flawless victory against the fundamentalists. But I haven't heard enough of Matt Dillahunty, but I don't think he tends to get on sort of classically trained philosophers and the classical theists' view of Christianity or beliefs or God, because you start talking in a different register. You're not just talking about show me the big thing, the fingerprint of God in the physical universe, because it's not a sensible question when you're talking about God in that sense, if you know what I'm saying. I'll pause there if Luke or Peter's got anything to say, but enough to say that I think he's doing a great job. And yeah, there's some interesting things, and some things if you're not thinking about the stuff that Matt's talking about, you're not really engaging with the issues at hand at all.
Well, I think you haven't. You self-confessed. You said you haven't watched a lot of Matt, and he was training to be a Baptist minister. So obviously, there's a lot of study, and I've, as I said, listened to a lot of what he says, and I think you've narrowed Christianity or faith down to even a smaller point, Richard, by saying unless you're a theologian or a philosopher and you're prepared to dive into the Bible as deeply as you possibly can, then your arguments aren't warranted. And Matt's arguments, I think, are absolutely perfect for the common person. That's who the Bible is applied to. It might not have been written that way, but certainly the application in church is go home, read Romans 3:16 and tell us what you think about it, or John 3:16 or whatever.
Oh yeah,
That Matt,
for sure.
Matt, I think, ticks the boxes as far as putting up a solid argument from an epistemology aspect to people arguing against people like Jordan. I can't think
Jordan
of his name
Peterson?
now. Yeah, Jordan Peterson. I mean, he is an intellectual giant. He is
Oh, yeah.
wow. And when Matt came up against him, I thought, you idiot, you are going to get so burned here. And yet he has that knowledge
Pretty
and
good.
experience to actually put something up. I didn't watch the end of it, so I don't know who won anyway, but very hard to prove Matt wrong. And that's what he is aiming for. He's aiming to put up an argument saying, here is the argument. It is fair and it is acceptable to expect there to be some evidence of proof for whatever it is we believe in our lives. Now, you and I and Luke probably come from the same place as far as, ghosts and tarot cards and reading tea leaves and numerology and all of that kind of stuff. They might go to a tarot readings and come out going, that's exactly who I am, and that's what I was expecting, and thank you so much, it's wonderful. They don't challenge it 20 years later and find out that actually everything you were told was going to happen didn't. But I think, Matt, watch him a bit more, and you still might not change your mind, but you could. It might be worthwhile checking out. I find him.
Yeah, no, and he seems to be quite coherent in the way he was talking, especially the bits I've seen. I guess one of the questions I have is a lot of this, and I've seen clips of him, and the highlights don't do justice to the full argument, obviously. But similar arguments I've heard tend to go down the track of, I want to see some empirical evidence in the same sort of level that you might go, the sciences look into, let's do chemistry. We do this experiment and out comes this result. I want something of that order. Otherwise,
what's wrong with that?
Well, that works for us. Well, it depends what the claim that's being made. So for claims such as, we anoint somebody with oil and they get healed. Well, that kind of thing has a claim in the physical realm where you should be able to test it, and you could run some tests on that. But the claim that there is a God falls into a slightly different realm of what's real and not real. We all know that empirical science and empirical evidence, empirical observation does not capture the entirety of what's real. It can't. I mean, nobody acts that way. In fact, science doesn't work that way. It basically, empirical observation says, we're going to narrow down the scope and we're only going to look at this. Everything else we're not going to look at. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist for the purpose of scientific inquiry. The problem that comes into play is when people go, aha, so therefore anything that empirical scientific inquiry can't actually observe does not exist, is not real. And that's where you fall into trouble, because there's all sorts of hazards and trip ups. And I personally don't know anybody who really lives that way, as if empirical evidence is the only thing that they're willing to depend on as something real. So
I think even within the field of epistemology, any serious discussion around epistemology has to make a distinction between obviously what is known and what can be known. That you have to draw a distinction between those two things, because there are things that can't be known or understood fully, and that's we need to understand when we're dealing with something that can be known and when we're dealing with something that possibly cannot be fully known. There is nothing, and this is where I think Matt's argument, I've got no doubt he would win like the majority of debates he's coming up against, because he is looking for potentially, again, that empirical evidence or a criteria of evidence that may not be, no one could ever provide that. And so he won't ever be satisfied. And that's okay. Yeah, God could. But the human beings that he's interviewing can't. And that's okay. And you know what? I think that's what I love about what we're doing here, is because we can't bring the Bible to you, Peter, and say, well, it says here in Ephesians or it says here in the Gospels, or because you go, well, that's nice. I don't buy into any of that. So what else is there? Yeah, and that forces you to have a discussion and a conversation that goes beyond Sunday school. And that's a good thing, because there was faith in the 300 years and a belief in God in the 300 years before the Bible came together. There was a wrestling and a belief in the existence of God, many different types of God, the whole concept of God in all of the time where the Old Testament, and then prior to that, where before things were, there was the written word. This has been something that's intrinsically human. Now, does that make it true? No. But it's also something that can't be ignored, that this isn't something that there's been a reliance on the Bible to generate that. And once we debunk that, men wrote this thing, so therefore that doesn't prove the existence of God. You go, okay, yeah, fair enough. That's true. It doesn't prove the existence of God, but that doesn't also prove that God doesn't exist either. There's two sides to it. And I think the existence of God is one of those things.
It's a classic line, isn't it, Luke? It's the burden of proof lies with the person making the claim. Atheists aren't making a claim that God doesn't exist. Some might, but there's that shadowed area between agnosticism and atheism, which is pretty much where I sit. I can't prove, nor do I would ever attempt to prove or say that God doesn't exist. I'm not making that claim. What I'm saying is I am not convinced with what I have seen. That's very different from you guys willing to lay down your life for the fact that God believes. And I think all of the things that Matt talks about, the claims, I mean, why is it unreasonable? Why is it unreasonable to expect God in the going back to beyond the days of when, miracles with Jesus and the claims in the Bible of God acting and talking and being able to hear about him. Since then, he's been silent and invisible. I mean, that is a stunningly amazing claim, to think that you can believe in something, a deity, which claims to be, or is set as being powerful and all love and capable of doing anything. Nothing. Zero. I mean, wow. Not one single person can come forward in the history of mankind and prove to us that God exists. Not one. Don't you find that? Don't you think you're really pushing the realms of acceptance? That's just crazy to someone like me.
Yeah, and yet there's millions and millions and hundreds of millions who have had enough experience with deity that they call God, be that Allah or the Christian God or the 300 million Hindu gods, whatever, because we're not talking about just the Christian God here, we're talking about this idea of God. Yet there are people that are having, and some of it is conditioned, I understand that. Some of it is religious based and you're born into it and it's just part of who you are or whatever. But how is it that there is so much belief? And that is indisputable. When we talk about empirical evidence, the numbers and the statistics of people who do believe in God,
But same reason why all the gods were created well before the Christian God. I mean, man has been doing it since the very beginning of time when they needed an explanation as to what the hell was going on. That's what you're believing in now.
But we don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore. So by that argument,
no, but you still, but what every other thing's been thrown out.
No, but with that argument, after the Enlightenment, we all should have gone, oh, we've got science now, so we don't actually need God. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen, and that's something that is evidence worth looking at. That's
because the only thing that hasn't been proven through science is the fact that we don't know what happens when we die. That's the selling point, by and large, isn't it? The selling point is confess to Jesus as Lord. Read John 3:16. And you'll have everlasting life. If those words, everlasting life or eternal life in heaven, weren't a part of it, I'm not sure there'd be too many converts who would go, well, hang on a minute, what am I signing up again for? The one thing we don't know as human beings, we've had thunder and lightning and everything else that we didn't know about have been replaced. All of those gods that we thought were creating these things, they're all gone. But there's still one thing we don't know is what happens when we die. And is there somebody out there, a higher power looking after us and who has our best interests? That's why religion is still around it in 2024, in spite of our growth, in spite of our understanding about the logic and ridiculousness of thinking that there's a deity that you can't see, feel, or touch or hear from, that we still want to believe in that and hang our hats on that. That is like, I don't know, I find it crazy.
That there has been a huge resurgence in that. That has been a big part of many elements of the church in order to drive whatever attendance and all sorts of stuff, is this emphasis on the afterlife. There is no argument for me here. What I think is fascinating is the birth of the church had nothing to do. The selling point, none of that was about the afterlife. You look at all of Paul's letters. All of the teachings, the stories, the letters, the manuscripts, all of this stuff, the biographies of Jesus. None of that had a massive, massive emphasis on it's all good, believe this stuff, and then when you die, you'll be okay.
Yep.
That has been a huge thing, and it's a lazy theology that the church has had to, because it works, fear works, right? But that's what's crazy about it. Whatever it was that birthed this movement, and I am talking specifically about the Christian, the Christian movement. It wasn't that. It wasn't this thing there. It was more about a different way of being in this world, rather than it was somewhere that we go after this world. And that's what I think is crazy. And I think what I think is beautiful is there is a lot of elements of the church today that are recapturing that and have changed an entire focus to think, okay, what does this mean if I have this faith in God? How is that being reflected in my actions? And the beautiful thing about that is when we're focusing on that, instead of just escaping to go to heaven one day or trying to avoid some place called hell one day, then it doesn't matter whether what you're believing is true or not to the world around you, because the way you're acting is actually having a positive impact on the world around us. You then have atheists that go, hey, you do you, I don't believe in your God, but I love what you're doing. And that's a very, very different situation to people that are just being Bible bashed, evangelized, or being told what to think and this is why and this is how, and there's hate and all sorts of stuff. Is like, I fully understand why there's been an entire movement of people that are going, well, hang on, let's kick back on this a bit, because it does matter now, because if your belief is driving you to behave in a way that is harming the world around you instead of actually healing it, then absolutely that bubble should be burst. If it can be. And I think that's what needs to be recaptured, because then these conversations become interesting, but not pivotal, because it's like, hey, if 90% of the world wants to actually believe in this God, even if that God doesn't exist, but they're actually making the world around them a better place, then that's a good thing. You can believe in unicorns and Santa Claus for all I care. Like that's, if that's leading your behavior to actually, be on the margins, lift up the oppressed, drive love, all that sort of stuff. That changes that conversation.
I find it very disturbing, Luke, that you're comparing Santa Claus to a unicorn. Do you have a problem with Santa Claus, or?
No, I'm in. I just realised that my kids might watch this, so I believe in
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's. I meant Santa Claus on a unicorn because we know that he doesn't ride unicorns.
It's interesting what you're talking about there, Luke, with the change, and I agree entirely. But what I was going to do this week was talk about cults, and there are many applications these days that you can actually apply to the Christian church. They're very cult-like as far as leaders and pressure on believing this and believe. If you go back to the early developments, of course, it wasn't like that at all, and you couldn't apply the term cult if you look at the actual definition of cult. I was going to talk about that tonight, but this other thing came up with Matt, and so I switched tack and decided to do this. But we might go down that path in another episode talking about cults.
Yeah, definitely.
There are many offshoots of Christianity and some fairly formidable. I mean, televangelism. If that ain't a cult, I'll go. It's the focuses on the wealth doctrine and all that stuff. But anyway, that's another thing. I just want to quickly mention to our viewers. Thank you for sticking with us. Last week we had quite a few questions at the very end, and we couldn't fit them all in. It was a bit rushed. So, if you've got a question or a thought, do you believe you have got empirical evidence that you'd like to share with us to prove the existence of God? Something that you've experienced yourself, something that you try and keep it outside of the Bible, because as Matt said, for me, in this argument, the Bible is irrelevant because I don't believe in a word of it. I think the whole thing is not to be taken seriously. So there's no point in applying what you believe is in the Bible as empirical evidence, because it's not. It's a claim. It's not evidence, and we've all agreed on that. So if you'd like to jump on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are at the moment, you're already on there, obviously, and to send us a question. It'll appear on our screen and we can have a look and have some fun. But so without using the Bible, and I think you've already answered this question, so it's perhaps a tad rhetorical, but without using the Bible, can you prove that God exists? If you want to dig deeper on that, I think you both said that.
I think depends what you mean by prove, because there's things we accept as 100% true without the same kind of burden of evidence we'd have on a peer-reviewed double-blind study in a medical journal. For instance, I know 100% that my wife loves me. I haven't. It's a lifetime of little bits of evidence here and there, a look, a word. There is evidence, but it's not like a proof. Like 100% she loves me. It's the accumulation of evidence. So there's things there. But when we're talking about God, the primary claims that I think hold a lot of interest to me are not empirically observable things. I think there is empirically observable evidence for God, but I think the primary place I've started when I've really wrestled this is more in the realm of logic and philosophy, thinking through. You look around the world and there's certain things that appear to be true, and you think about it and you go, oh, there's some things that I think I'll think about. They'd hold no empirical evidence, yet some of it forms the very basis of the scientific method itself. For instance, mathematics. Mathematics is not an empirically observable conclusion. There's no empirical evidence for mathematics and logic. For instance, the example that people use, like 2 and 2 is equal to 4. doesn't really help the case a lot, because then people go, well, that's just like the rules we've decided that, to play with. It's only when you start really talking to people who are using mathematics in the deep sciences like physics, for instance, so mathematics doesn't seem to be just like a set of agreed rules that all the humans decided that we're going to play by. It seems to be actually fundamental to the structure of the universe itself, to such a degree that physicists can sit in their room, think about mathematics, logics, and come up with this is how the universe must be. We should be able to identify this kind of particle. And then they do these experiments, and maybe even 50, 60, 70, 80 years later, they discover this thing that a person said had to be true because they used mathematics and logic. So mathematics seems to be the actual baked into the structure of the universe. It's not just something humans have made up. And yet mathematics is not, you don't get to mathematics and logic by doing an experiment like, empirical evidence will lead us to conclude that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. It will not lead you to the truth of logic. You get to the truth of mathematics and logic through reasoning, through actually thinking through the steps. And I think there's a way of thinking in that register that I think you have to make some serious decisions about what you think the real world is like. For me, the cosmological argument, we've talked about this before, that it seems like in the world, you look around, and this is empirical evidence. You look around the world and it looks like every single thing that there is needs a reason to be. If something happens, there's got to be a reason that things happened. If there's a car parked out the front of my house, I don't go, whew, that just appeared out of nowhere. No, I think, well, somebody drove it there. And I was like, well, why'd somebody drive it there? And well, how'd the car, and then I follow this chain of causality of reasons all the way down. And eventually you get to the point where you go, there has to be something that doesn't have a first logical cause. And then you get to a decision. You have to either say, no, everything doesn't need a reason to exist. The universe just is. It's magic. I don't see any other way of saying it any differently. I've never heard of an argument that denies the first cause of things. That doesn't sound to me like somebody just saying, trust me, it's magic. Trust me, it's just the way the universe is. It holds no more logical weight to me. And this is the cosmological argument that says that first cause, the necessary thing, the thing that is without being caused, we use the label and we put God against that. And I think for me, there's no getting around that. So to me, that proves that God is, or I have to accept a universe that doesn't play to the rules that we normally play with. For instance, the scientific method 100% relies on there has to be a reason for everything, and we're going to find that reason. And yet when we get to the big question, we go, no, it doesn't apply there. Hang on, guys, don't get all silly with the science in the big question of how did everything get started. It doesn't apply there. It seems very ingenious. It seems special pleading on the case of people who don't hold that. Now that gets us to the point of saying there is a thing that caused everything. Classical theists call that God. Other people will call it something else. But to me, that's an inescapable conclusion, using reason, which is evidence, in the same way that maths and logic is evidence. And if you can't accept reasoning as evidence, I don't know how you even reason to make any arguments. So that it is evidence. There is a God. Or you have to accept some things about this universe that you don't really believe because you don't really live that way. It's just words. It's just making claims that you don't really believe because you don't really live that way. The scientists act as if it's true. They act as if there's universal causality. So I find that very compelling, but that just gets us off the blocks. That says there is a thing called God. I wouldn't even say it's a being called God, but there's a thing called God that that is there.
The
And then we
unmoved mover.
from there. So for me, I think we can get from 0 to 0.01 in the God question using very solid evidence. You may disagree with me. I think very good minds have disagreed in that case. I've listened to arguments left, right, and center for many years, and I have not found anything more compelling than that as a conclusion. So that's where I'd start. I think there's 100% evidence for the existence of God that's reason driven.
I think the problem I have, and that's very eloquently put, mate. The problem I have with that is it can be refuted, whether it's correct or incorrect. I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and you left it out there saying that there are people who will
Mhm.
argue against it. I'm talking about stuff that you cannot argue against. Beam of light flies down from the heavens to earth, and in it is a shape of a being, and there's communication. I'm not saying I expect those
Oh,
things,
look, but
but I'm
that
talking
has
about
happened before. 100%. That event has happened before. Beam of light
not
from
to
heaven
me.
with a being in it. Oh no, not to you, but
Who?
not to
What are you
me,
talking about?
not to Luke. But it's happened in the world. I'm sure because there's a lot of people who've said it's happened.
But
How can you
can't. Yeah, but
test
that doesn't mean
any
it's happened
claim?
because people have said it's happened. That doesn't mean it's true. That's just another claim
Exactly.
by
Yeah, exactly.
some
So,
nutbag. So, and I like your
so
reference to
how
Ray
would
Comfort.
you, but how would you test that claim is true or not if it's not
Well,
it's not a repeatable thing?
it's
So
not. If
there's
it's God,
certain
it can
claims
be.
that are inaccessible to the empirical observations. There's
Not what if it's
claims
what
of
if it's a
reason.
vision? What if it's a vision or something happened in the heavens that everyone could visualize or actually see with their own eyes on Earth, and would all be convinced that this? So what I'm talking about is, it changes
That's a really good question, Peter.
because
Why doesn't God just
because
like appear in the heavens and say, "Here I am, believe in me. I'm the all-powerful being that you should believe in"? Is that the question? Like, why doesn't he just make it so obvious with our eyes
no.
that
Look, I mean, there's a
we have
million and
no?
one ways it could happen without getting into
Yeah,
how that could
yeah,
physically happen. The technology
but yeah,
would be.
just
I'm
something
talking
that
about
everyone
something that
I
we
would
all
see.
observe that cannot be reproduced any other way apart from a God. Now, the answer to your question is another question, which would be, surely God would know how to do that.
Mm,
If he's
yeah,
sitting up there and
absolutely.
looking down and going, "Oh, I cannot believe the confusion," and one of our failings, I think, as human beings, is that we talk about God as if it's a bloke up there with a beard, because we've seen the
That's right.
we
You're right,
refer to
Peter.
him as a him, we refer to it as a male kind of God thing, and a being, and
Yeah,
that he could do this if he really wanted to. Well, let's just, for the sake of an argument, let's just say it's a he, so that we understand it's a being, a deity
yeah,
that could do. He would know exactly what it would take. Shouldn't be us to sit here debate going, well, how could God let us all know at the same time? He's God. If God is what people have made him out to be and what we all think that he might be, he could let every single person on the planet know immediately through connecting through your brain, through your heart. I don't know, but it can be done because it's a God. We're
yeah,
not talking about limitations. I think that the problem, once you start putting limitations on God, or having the audacity to assume that we know what God even is, everything we are
yeah. You're
talking
right.
about tonight is either unprovable because it's a text, or the fact that none of us have actually had any experience, which is irrefutably God. There's so many things it could be. You talk about the guy who had the stroke and how he recovered. Great story, but there's no proof that it actually could have been, that had to be that. There couldn't possibly be anything else. Of course it can be.
Yeah,
We are
exactly.
debating stuff that none of us have the faintest idea, other than looking through other forms of text and stories, who God is, what God is, what God isn't. It's, do you know what I mean? There
Mm.
needs to be some way. If God is real, why is he sitting up there going, "I'm not going to show you"?
Well, one of the
I can't show you.
I'll quickly answer one thing, and then I'll let Luke jump in. If God, let's pretend altogether that God is this amazing. It's like everything. It's huge. He's so. I'm going to use the he because we're doing that. He is so far beyond us in every area. If that kind of thing were to make themselves fully accessibly known to us, it would completely remove any of these possibilities. Free will, like, if the ability to freely choose to love such a being, and I'm going to use the word being as well, would disappear. You'd have
Why could you not still choose? Why could you still choose not to love it?
Because you'll be so overwhelmingly with the presence of it. It's not like
Still has
like
to be free will. He's not telling you have to do this. He's appearing, saying, make your choice. It surely is that the story of Revelation, that's what's going to happen. Those that want to choose can ascend to heaven.
That's
and
one of
those
the
that don't.
stories of Revelation, but whoever preaches that got it wrong, 100%.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to disagree with every sort of mainstream story just because I'm ornery, but a being that is so far beyond us, we could not choose to connect or not connect. The distance in power and glory and knowledge and being would be so far that to appear as he truly is would eradicate any choice we'd have. We'd just be
hang on. You're hypothesizing again. We've got why could it not be a God that was accessible? Why does it have to be? This is the problem, Rich, is that you've already made up your mind that God is someone. If it appeared in front of us, we would have no free will. It would be taken from us immediately, and we would fall to our knees and love, which God would still know is still a choice. So it's still free will, whether you get up, whether you lay down or get up. But you've just painted a picture of an overwhelmingly powerful, incredible being that if it appeared, we would just all lose our minds. We don't know that that's what God might be a meek old lady. We don't know. She could be up there knitting.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Again,
Why?
I've started my conception of God in the looking around the world as what it is. It seems there's a causal thing, and then you start thinking about when you go to the edge of causality, that being is everything that causality is not by definition. Like a contingent.
Wouldn't Darwin
thing
argue that causality is also a part of evolution?
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well then why can't the whole thing just be causality? Why can't it be the whole world exists because of the evolution and the creation of the beginning and the Big Bang, and who we are now? Because if that's a possibility you have to look at, because
I think
if there's no God, then there must be. Sorry?
Yeah, no, it is. I think the best scientific evidence is that's how it started. Probably a Big Bang. There's an idea that maybe the universe is eternal. Either way, that doesn't negate the argument that everything contingent, in this universe seems to need a cause to be there. Therefore, you get to the edge of it and you have to make a claim. There is something beyond it that's not contingent, or something magic happens and just don't think about it. Don't look here. Don't do anything. That's the only choice you have when you get to the edge. And so when you get to the edge, you go, well, that thing on the other edge, we can't see easily, but we can think very rationally about it. If everything's contingent and needs a contingent, so the way we conclude is like, oh, we know what that has to be. It has to be uncaused. It can't be caused like everything else. Otherwise, we're just putting another link on the chain, and then we get to the end of the chain and have to find something else. So the end of
all the way down.
So the end of the chain, we can definitely make some conclusions. It's uncaused, and there's a whole range of other things that ends up. It's not like us in so many different ways. So there's different qualities that, if that thing actually exists, it's going to be this. It can't be an little old meek lady, because that's just another sort of made up thing. This other thing is being itself, it's power itself. And then if you look at some other lines of argument, you're talking about beauty itself, glory itself. In fact, all of the perfections end up in this thing. And if that
Love
thing
itself.
appeared to you, it's infinite, it's infinity itself. A finite being cannot stand in any knowledge or will against that. That's I think that's been explored in science fiction with just aliens that are a little bit more powerful than us, just destroying every shred of culture. You see it when the colonial powers came and jumped at us. I mean, even we're talking about we're talking about the same race, same everything, a slight difference in culture completely eradicates the culture that was there before. How much more if the thing that is God appeared to us as it really is, would eradicate everything else? It's just, I don't see any way around it.
You see that in power differentials in human relationships all over the shop between a parent and a child. There is a power differential there that can make a child act in a certain way. That may not be that where that child necessarily doesn't have a full choice because they're trying to whatever please the parent. You see it in all sorts of between wealth and status, and there is a number of observable power differentials that impact on the free will in a sense, to a very minor degree in comparison to what we're talking. But
how much more if there's an infinite?
How much more? And that's exactly right. It would result. It would result in an absolute impact on behavior, on decision, on free will. So therefore, is that something that God would want to do?
Yeah. So what is the higher value? I want you to believe in me, or I want you to grow from the seed of rationality that I planted in humanity. And as it's evolving through, do I want to see that seed grow into the fullness of being that it's been sort of started as being? Or do I want it to believe in me? It seems like when we look at the world, it looks like the choice is already made. An evolving species, evolving planet, it seems to be going along a trajectory that if there was a God, he values that more than appearing. And that may not be a compelling argument to others, but certainly not a logically incoherent argument. And so the question of why doesn't God just appear? Given a couple of givens, God exists, and it seems that he's not interested, he's more interested in something else than appearing. Okay. It seems to me by demanding such a thing, you're getting upset that a God that you've created doesn't exist rather than a possible God doesn't exist.
I think that's
the same.
That's what you got.
The same God I created in my mind is the same God that you've created in yours, and Luke and everyone else on the planet. And this is the problem you have when there's no empirical evidence that something can't be falsified. What do we end up with, guys? What do we end up? Because you're talking about all the majesty and beautiful things. You need to couple them all together with the same God that created, little bugs that crawl on the back of kids' eyes and make them blind, and the fact that
that's the hard question,
it's
man.
Well, it's not a nice world. I mean, it's an incredibly hot, inhospitable country, planet that is constantly overheating and causing earthquakes. And there's fires and there's flood and famine. We've gone through all of this before of all of the stuff, and I can't. I don't know. I'd really love to dig deep on why you guys seem to struggle with really seeing the obvious, the horrific. There's always excuses as to why it is like that. You try and talk your way out of that. It's okay to just argue biblically, if you like, out of why it is the way it is, and everyone like me who thinks it's ridiculous is being unfair. It's completely logical and natural to look at the planet and go, it is a freaking mess. It is a really inhospitable place to be sometimes. Now, why in heaven's name, why would God make a planet that is so, he could have made it anyway. He could have made us anyway. Why did he make us as beings that choke regularly? People around the whole world die regularly from choking because the windpipe and where the food goes are so close to one another. What if you're going to make a being? Why would you make it so bad? Why would you make it so unuser friendly, if you like? I mean, if we could have been anything, why this? Because then the argument is we're made in his image. Really? In what way? In what way are we made in the image of a God who created us like this? It is absurd in the I don't know, in the strongest words I could possibly think of.
Yeah, Peter, that is the question. I think all the other questions fall under that one. That's the if we can't get an answer to that, all the other questions don't even matter. I think that's the question that most people ask. And there's, anybody, I'll say this, I don't know if you've got anything, Luke, but anybody who reckons they've got an easy answer to that, first of all, really either hasn't really thought about the question. Like you don't, if you think there's an easy answer to that question, you don't understand the question, or you just, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There is. For me, one of the questions I have is like I dwell in the world of a sort of a Christian defense of how can such a thing be. It is the part of my Christianity that I'm most unsatisfied with. Most unsatisfied. I don't think there's a good answer to that, or a very nice answer. There's a logically coherent answer, but that doesn't mean it's a nice one. But then, if I put myself in the shoes that says, okay, there is no God, and what we see here is literally has to be one of the cruelest, meanest accidents. There cannot be any kind of philosophical stance toward the world except for absolute nihilism. I don't see there's any other choice. If you believe there is no God, there's no, and what I mean by no God, there's no transcendental reality beyond what we see and experience. How can you be anything except a nihilist, which is everything is without meaning.
Yep.
Get what you can get. There you go.
Yep.
And I think there's so many problems with that kind of stance toward the world. And my problem really is I've never yet met a person living who actually believes that all the way down. People who believe it all the way down tend to be very, very troubled. And so I'm like, okay, that's one way of being in the world, but I'm yet to encounter anybody who really believes that's the way it is, because no one acts like there's no meaning to life. There's no morality. There's no absolute morality. And all those sort of questions, I'm like, well, for me, it has to be real. And to be real, you've got to be living it. And otherwise, it's just words. I just don't understand.
I think that observing the world and the planet in which we live and seeing what a cruel, horrible place, you've just got to look at, what's happening in Gaza and the Israeli
nightmare
conflict. And you just, and the fact that McDonald's are opening a new restaurant every 14.5 hours. So there are complete and utter money-obsessed maniacs, and I use the word maniacs and criminal maniacs who are so not interested in what it's doing to the planet, the amount of land they have to clear so they can build another freaking McDonald's store. When is enough for these people? Who are these people? I don't know anyone who looks at world like this, but there's a whole raft of them out there. Tens of thousands of them. How many? I don't know. spread across the world who are only interested in getting rich and being so stupid that not understanding you can't take it with you. You're just going to leave it all behind. You're going to end up in the same coffin in the ground like everyone else on the planet. And yet they are willing to destroy our planet 14.5 hours for every McDonald's store that opens up. That's how long it takes. And bang, it's another one, because they want to completely dominate the world. So if you look at that, it's pretty hard to go past nihilism to a large degree, but that's just one extreme part of the world. There are people like us who you think are fairly normal. There are sadly many, many maniacs in the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier for me to look at that, and we did that with the whole alien episode. It's easier to look at that and go, this is exactly how we have behaved from the beginning. I have no doubt it's how we will behave at the end. And everything in between is just an act of survival, and to try and find the time and the people around you who care, who are generous, who love, who aren't violent, the people who are considered beautiful. And if you look at us, we are that compared to the maniacs who are controlling McDonald's. Those people have no right to live freely among us, doing what they are doing, destroying our beautiful planet. And it's the most incredible place. It is extraordinarily beautiful, and it is extraordinarily ugly. And I can't do anything. I can't look at and try and fit God into it. I cannot fit a God into what we see. It is, to me, and I'm cruising down the road, looking around and just waiting. But from now, what I can see, it is not a reflection of a God who in any way, shape or form either can or wants to change our world that we live in under this pretense. We all disappeared, and now we're back. It's a miracle. Did you guys not lose screen? You did. You know,
You paused for a moment.
Yeah, it dropped out.
What? Sorry.
No, so you dropped out for a moment. Yeah, but you're right, Peter. That's the question, and I think it's so easy. You know, if I'm honest about my faith journey, that's the line where I could easily fall one way or the other. And I can tell you, I've honestly looked at both sides of that line. And yet,
what are you, Joni Mitchell?
I fall on the belief side of the line. I think there's ways of thinking about it that you basically have to go to the greater good defense, that there's a reason for allowing such a thing because there's something better. And that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But then the alternative is for me personally, would not be a comfortable way through the world, because it's utter nihilism. It has to be. And utter nihilism is not a viable way of being in the world. It's a way of, I'm talking about utter nihilism, not struggling with stuff like like you've expressed. Utter nihilism is a way of death, and that cannot be a true way of being. And so you've got to make a call somewhere. And I think in my experience, there's enough that pushes me this way to really believe. And I think it's a very personal thing. That's the problem as well. The belief in God, the evidence for God, is not empirical as such. It's very much more a personal knowing. And as I've argued, there's a way of knowing, an epistemology that we all use. We don't rely on empirical evidence for every decision, for everything that we think is true, and act as if it's true. and God sort of sits in that realm. And but because of that, I'm not going to go to you, Peter. You better see things my way. You better believe in the God I believe in the way I believe in him. Because who am I to go to another man and do it? I can offer. And if it's unconvincing, I go, yeah, it's unconvincing, but the agnostic way of being in the world is very unconvincing to me. Like, so.
Yeah, look, same. I share that. I mean, I'm vehemently opposed to labels of any description, because I think every label that you are given is only a part of the picture. You can't label anyone and say you are 100% that. There's no room to move.
Good.
There's no exceptions. That's just not. And you change. You're not the same person day after day after day. You think about things. You experience things. You go, hang on a minute, I never thought about that. I've heard so many things from you guys I haven't heard before, and it makes you think and stop and realize that it's forever changing. Just before we wrap up, because we started late, we're going to go a little bit more, because I've got
go a little bit more. I'm all right.
Question. Good, Luke. I've got a question for you and for Rich. I would like to ask you. I watched the clip today, and I think the originator of this story might have been Carl Sagan. The watch principle: the man walking along the beach and finds the watch, and then it has to be a creator. And what he said after that was, "What about a fish? You hadn't seen this fish before, and you found the fish. That's not a creator. It's something that just evolved." What do you think about the old watch, finding the watch on the beach story, and you look at it and think it has to be a creator? And then, of course, he takes the argument further on and said, but that doesn't apply to everything. It's only amazing because it's a watch.
Yeah, I mean,
try to get into it, basically.
It is a bit of a flawed argument for mine, because we use a watch is used because we know how intricate it is. And I love getting lost on random videos. And I went through a big thing of watching watches be put together, and it blew my mind that what goes into this thing. And so I fully understand why the watch would be used as this thing. That how could this would just appear? There must be.
But his main argument, of course, is the intricacies of a human eye is far more complex than a watch ever could be.
And that's what I was going to say. But even a fish, how he says, well, what about a fish? The intricacies of a fish are unbelievable. And so for me, because I would classify myself as, I think the best explanation would be theistic evolution, which means I think evolution is probably the way that the world has come about, and we have sort of evolved. I think that's the evidence sort of best positions that. But that takes you back to it. Yeah, that's right. But that takes you back to, and same with the Big Bang and all that sort of stuff. But similar to what Rich was saying earlier, it takes you back to that initial thing. There has to be a what do they call it? The immovable mover, the unmoved mover, or the uncaused causer, whatever it is. There has to be something that sets that off. And I think for me, that's a better argument than saying, well, the whole watch thing, because there's a beauty in how, I think there's an unbelievable beauty in how evolution works. The complexity, yet the simplicity. How, and that is, why could you not look at that and say, well, if that started out and that was the method that God used in order to let life flourish in creation, that's an amazing thing. It doesn't have to be. There's all sorts of problems with the idea of a watch just being plopped on the beach, Adam and Eve just being plopped in a garden, and then there you go. That we know that's not the truth. We know that's not what happened, and you don't need that to be true in order for. I don't know why I'm giving thumbs up there. You don't need that to be true in order to take a stance that God is the initial creator. There's no conflict there for me. So that would be my response to it. I understand the argument behind it, but I think it's only an argument really that holds weight for those who are anti-evolutionists, because they think that that's you can't believe in a creator, a God as a creator, and also believe in the science of evolution. But that's simply not true. That's just that's a bad story that we've been telling. That's not helpful in any way, and it creates
I think
science
it's a
deniers
fairly,
and all sorts.
yeah, it's a fairly recent as far as the history of the planet goes, an adaptation of there was a time, of course, when I'd never heard of a Christian who would even consider the idea that evolution or the Big Bang, vehemently opposed to anything other than God just created it and didn't explain cavemen and all that kind of stuff. But that's all right. I just find as we go through further on in time, and each one of these things comes along, and wise Christian people are going, well, okay, of course, evolution's proven fact. It's not a debate anymore. The Big Bang, according to Brian, astrophysicist, English guy, what's his name? We can see Brian,
Exactly.
who used to be the keyboard player in D-Ream, the band, believe it or not. Now he's an astrophysicist or whatever. But the more we go through time, the more of these things are sort of going side by side. There was a time when scientists could never been paralleled with a belief in God. Now, and I'm just wondering whether we're actually getting closer and closer to the point where we go, you know what? I think it's just all explained now. Not in our lifetime, and maybe not in our children or even our grandchildren, but it's changing. It's developing into more of a side-by-side kind of deal. And before it wasn't, and that's come together, and now I think it's just going to cross over, and I think that eventually there's going to be a time when people are just going to go, cannot believe we just didn't follow the science, and we don't need to fit God into all of this to make it happen, to understand why we're all here.
I'll lob one little comment about the watchmaker thing, and yeah, I think that's conclusive proof against intelligent design. Even some people believe in evolution. As Christians, want God to be like designing in it, and there's so many problems with that philosophically as well. But the common thread between the watch and the fish is the rationality of it. There's form and there's function. There's a way. It's almost as if it's not like it's just signals and an impulse. We look at it and it's almost as if there's something in the fish that reaches out to us as we reach to it, so we can understand it and know it and figure it out. It's not just sort of very basic input output. There's something about rationality and mind and understanding. Otherwise, the argument is not an argument. There's complexity that I understand in the watch. There's complexity I understand in the human eye. To me, that speaks of a very key principle of rationality, which is mind. I think mind is a key feature of the universe. A lot of people don't buy into it, but I just see so many bits, the way we talk, the way we even act as if the world is put together, that mind is a feature of it all. And that's where, as a theist, I really draw a lot of understanding about how can God and evolution and science all hang together. It's like, if science didn't work, that would be great evidence that there wasn't a God. Because that would mean that rationality is not a key feature of the universe. It's just some jumbled mess that somehow happened to fall into an understandable heap for us to look at for a little while and go, if you think that's how it is, that's how it is. Great. I tend to see that the evidence shows that the universe is rational from the bottom up, like maths works from the bottom all the way to the top. And therefore, what is that coming from? How can rationality seem to infuse the entire universe with something that's understandable? It seems like it's a key principle, and that's, that cannot be adequately wrestled with, in my opinion, without some kind of appeal to transcendence, something more than what we can feel and touch. but that doesn't bring us any closer to a Christian God of the 21st century evangelicals. But it brings us
Thank
very
you. Waiting
close
for you to
to
say that.
yeah, it brings us very close to a lot of what people were talking about in the early centuries of the church. Again, they would have laughed at some of the stuff that Christians are going around talking about evolution and creation.
Of course.
The early church theologians were like, if you read the Genesis account as a literal story, you're foolish and ignorant. That was the teaching of the early church. And somehow we've flipped it now. So I think there's a lot of stuff that the modern church are willing, like they built these little hills to die on that were never even a part of our faith. So what are we doing with it? Throw it out. You might have to throw the whole thing out, like Peter has. Maybe that's what you have to do. I don't think yet. I think you can clear house without throwing it all out. But either way, I think we get back to where we started. Matt Dillahunty, doing the Lord's work, clearing the house of nasty fundamentalism. So that's going to get me into trouble if it's out, I guess. There's a comment.
No, Rob. Yes, I was just about to read that. Frank Tovey. I'll make it easy. There's zero proof of a God. The idea is based on ancient myths, and it is so extremely incompatible with what we see in the world. Frank, thank you so much. You've articulated perfectly exactly how I feel. And it's really hard to argue with that because it is the roots of modern day Christianity are connected in some way, although be it distant, we'll talk about the early. But yeah, look, mate, I agree. I mean, and that's putting it bluntly. Zero proof of a God, the idea based on ancient myths is so extremely incompatible with what we see in the world. Thank you, Frank, for that. Mate, where are you from? Give us a quick little note. Tell us where you are. You're in Australia. You living it up in Portugal? Where are you? Give us a hoy. But thank you for the comment. We're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. So if you have got a final comment, anyone, let us know what you think about tonight's debate. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about. A debate subject for next Wednesday. What is the date today? It's the 21st of February, isn't it? Of course. Yeah. Okay. So we'll get together. We'll get together next Wednesday on the 28th at 8:00. Hopefully we'll start on time. We've got all the bugs ironed out. Yeah, guys, you want to just finish up with what we're talking about, and then we can all go to bed separately.
Yeah, no, this was a good debate. I think the question, if you're not asking this question, Peter, you're not awake. So yeah, good on you for asking it.
Pleasure, mate.
I hope there was a lot of food for thought, and even if it's made you think more deeply about your position, like Frank, about proof of God, ancient myths, even if he knows better why he thinks that, this is a win for me.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I like to have comments like that, but I'd like to know why Frank thinks that way, because it's good.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I think Frank's I think I've seen him before. Okay, first Belgium. Time that you watch the stream. Hey, Frank, look out for a link I'll pop up. It's basically a way that we can get some voice memos, voice comments from you. You can go online onto website, record a question, comment, something like that. We'd love to hear from you and pull you into the show. So look out for that in the next couple of days.
Yeah, if you've always wanted to be a podcast star and you want to voice your strong opinions, you are most welcome to do that. We'd love to have you a part. One of the top 10 places in the world I'd love to go to, Belgium. So if you've got a spare room, Frank, let us know. First time you've watched the stream, how did you come about finding it, and what do you think? What would you like us to talk about? The feedback would be absolutely fabulous, Frank. So much. Thanks so much for that, Frank Tovey. Good stuff. Yeah.
Awesome.
Luke,
Yeah.
finishing thought?
No, but there's so much. We've covered a lot of ground. I think it's been a really important conversation, and I'd like to echo what Rich said. I think if people can I guess walk away listening from what we've been saying, and either have food for thought that this is a complex question. It's not slam dunk on either side of it.
No.
There's nuance, there's gray areas, and that's exactly what this whole thing is about, is us actually exploring that and either coming away thinking, yep, now I understand better why I believe what I believe, or having that's those seeds planted to kind of wrestle and explore it further. What a gift. And no, I think it's been excellent. There's been a lot that I don't even want to get back into some of it, because I think it's going to launch into a whole nother conversation. So I'm showing some restraint, but I'm looking forward to picking up some of these other topics again in coming weeks. The one around God being loving and powerful, I think, is important. And I would also love to explore further the idea of, what would it look like if God did appear to everyone, made it absolutely like there was zero dispute. This was God making clear his presence to everyone.
Yeah, good thought experiment.
Why, as a thought experiment, similar to like what we did with the aliens one, what would the impact of that be?
Idea.
Is that something that would be a good thing or a bad thing? Why would God do that? Why wouldn't God do that? I think that'd be a great conversation, because there's a lot there.
Well, and I think it's a fair question too, because that is where believers are headed. They're headed toward the belief that Jesus is going to return. They've listed out the 14 signs to look forward to, and they are all involving stuff that's
in 1989,
in
in
the world.
1990,
Yeah, it's
and 91, 92.
Interesting. One of the things, and something we may talk about later, one of the interesting things was that Jesus saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, about when stars fall from the sky, that is one of the early signs. And of course, if you look back at, there were probably just meteorites, and the earth and the moon would be dark, and people won't be able to be guided by the stars, the northern star, because you won't be able to see them, and just stuff like that, which again, the commentary on that scripture from the person who wrote in this letter was saying, wouldn't Jesus have known that they weren't stars falling from the sky? That would obviously be a meteorite shower or something. I don't know. Richard's shaking his head. You disagree with that, or is that just a?
I don't think he would. Yeah. If
no.
Unless he was, unless we're not Christians, you'd have to say that he thought the way that everybody thought, and they were just things hung up in the sky that could fall down. Yeah,
well,
you'd have to.
And you know what? We had a great. Rich and I and some other people had a great conversation about this not long ago, about what the humanity of Jesus, and what would he have known, what didn't he know? Jesus says that the mustard seed is the smallest seed on earth. We know that's not true. Now, would he have known that as a first century Palestinian Jew? No, and that's okay.
Would he not know that as the Son of God?
Exactly, and that's the question around his divinity and his humanity. It says he's fully God and fully man, but it's not like he could. I don't think we should look at Jesus as someone who could flick between God mode, and
God mode,
and human mode. It's like that's a caricature. There's got to be a more mature way of looking at that and understanding, which goes beyond the scope of what we're talking about now. But again, another good conversation.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. I want to get into the cults, because I think we'd have fun with that one. In a very sort of fun way, but there's some real horrific stuff around that as well.
Well, depending on who you listen to, depending on what articles you read, there are people who swear by the fact that most Christianity and certainly borderline with the true definition, they're not calling Christians a cult per se as a derogatory term, rather than fitting it into the Oxford Dictionary's definition of what is a cult. And because there's no walls around what religious organizations can do and where they go and how far they push the boundaries, it is very easy to cross over to the description and fill it out perfectly as a cult. We like to think about the Jehovah's and the Mormons and the Scientology and all of that. We like to label them as cults because they really fit the parameters that have been set for that definition. But it is fascinating. I looked quite far into it, and it's yeah, depending on what you read, you can be convinced that Christianity or Catholicism is definitely a cult, or it's not at all. So that could be something really worth interesting. I think we could talk about that. And I really want to get at some stage to talk about all of the other things in life that we believe in. Just broaden our scope a little bit and talk about how we get, the belief in something is no different. You look at something, you're convinced it's true. It sounds fascinating and wonderful and exciting that someone can tell me my future. And so I, give someone $50 and come away with a big smile on my face thinking, thank you, I've just had my future mapped out in front of me. And that to me is a sign of gullibility and desperation as well. And I kind of understand that. That's what got me into believing in God in the first place. It was personal horrific stories and things that happened, and that's why I got into it as well. So I understand that, but look, we must wrap it up. Thanks again to Frank. I hope you can join us next Wednesday. It'll be the 28th at 8 o'clock. Hopefully we'll be on time, get our technology together. Thanks to Rich for fixing my situation tonight, and for Luke. And hopefully Suresh will be back with us next Wednesday. That'll be terrific. Always puts a very, very different slant on things that we talk about, and we appreciate him for doing that. But thank you everyone for your company tonight. Hopefully we'll join you next Wednesday. It is bye for now. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Rich. Catch ya.
Thanks, mate.
See you guys.